Hello, my name is Tanner Filippone, and today I'm here representing the General Motors Company. In this video, I'll be talking about the evolution of GM and how they've gotten themselves in the position they are today and found financial success through technological advancements through their automotive manufacturing. Behind me, you'll see an American-built muscle car, a 1969 Dodge Charger. If I direct your attention over here, you'll see another American-made vehicle, a 1979 Ford F-250. And if you look over here, you'll see two vehicles, each of which have something in common, and although you may not look it, both of which are manufactured by GM. This vehicle here is a 1967 Pontiac GM manufactured Firebird. In this case, you have the same manufacturer company in the case of GMC, in which you have a 2015 GMC Terrain. Both of which being manufactured by GM, these cars, although it may not look it, have similar ideals and advancements in them, in the basis that not their technology is the same, but their groundbreaking technology that they individually had a bigger impact on society at the time. In the case of the Firebird, it was one of the first cars to display a speedometer on the hood, many of which saw that as a groundbreaking technological advancement and thought it was very cool, leading this car to be one of the greatest selling cars of its era and its year. In the case of the 2015 Terrain, you have advancements so much larger and groundbreaking than what you saw in the Firebird. But in the case of the Terrain, it is simply a average day commuter car, being a middle level priced car and a middle level bought car. Not experiencing a massive amount of sales, although it was still successful, it was not as groundbreaking as the Firebird. But that does not put it to shame in the case that both of these display GM innovation. In the case of the Terrain, you have services provided like OnStar, which is a GM branch in which they provide services that can allow for emergency services, assistance services in which people can get more information about the car that they are using. In the case of that, this car is so much more technologically advanced and yet displays the same amount of innovation through the General Motors Company that this car over here does. In the case that this car has a backup camera and all these other advancements and technological instances in it, in the case of the Firebird, it was simply a matter of what was in at the time. And that just shows how GM has evolved and been able to fit in with its era, leading them to be the #1 American selling vehicle manufacturer in the case of General Motors Company. As far as worldwide goes, they are 5th worldwide, which is absolutely massive compared to other brands, leading them to have over 6 million sales this year alone. And in the case of other brands, people may compare GM and Chevrolet to brands like Ford and Dodge. But in the case of Ford, founded in 1903 in June, they were many years ahead of GM in the case that they were the first large company with their groundbreaking development of the Model T and their early trucks. In the case of GM coming in 1908 in September by William C. Durant, this was more than just another car company. In the case that when they first started, they were only worth $12.5 million. And that wasn't, laughable at the time, and it was a solid amount of money. But when you look at it today, and GM is now worth $48.87 billion in modern day America, it really makes you realize how far the company has come as a whole. As in its early ages, it did fall behind to other companies like Ford, who were a lot more advanced during the time. But through innovation and advancement, GM has caught up and surpassed those companies. GM is not only a smaller company than Ford, but is also driving more sales and is having a bigger impact on the American economy, leading it to be so much more than just a vehicle manufacturer. In the case of GM, you find that they are so much more than just a vehicle producer. Not only that, they allow services like I previously stated in the case of OnStar, which you can have emergency access, and they also have parts services. In the case of something so large like a car, they also produce other things that I will now pull out of my pocket. You see a spark plug, a AC Delco GM manufactured spark plug. GM covers so much more than just vehicles. They produce parts. In their case of their parts, manufacturer of AC Delco, still produced by GM, they allow for a larger coverage of the market. In the situation that if you do buy a General Motors car, you also have the opportunity to buy General Motors parts for that car. For example, many people are going to buy a brand new car at a dealership. In the case that that dealership is driving money into General Motors as a company because General Motors is providing the cars. So for example, you buy that car, the money goes back to General Motors. In the case that if that car breaks, you are most likely bringing it back to the dealership. That dealership is not only profiting off of the labor and work that they are doing in your car, but they are more than likely using GM parts in the case of, like I stated earlier, AC Delco. So something as big as a $30,000 brand new car in 2015 can transform into something that can fit in your pocket, which will run you about 90 cents. And that just displays the market coverage that GM has. And it displays innovation as they've been able to turn into what was a company that started off as Oldsmobile, Pontiac, small truck makers that only went about 60 miles an hour to brands like Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, and GMC now today. People don't realize that GM extends farther than just Chevy or GMC. They own these other companies in the form of, like I said, Cadillac and Buick. These companies allowed for a wider array of coverage. In the case that Cadillac is more of a luxury model, GMC is more of a truck and is more of a truck producer. In the case that Chevrolet also covers cars, and they also have the Corvette and stuff like this. This allows for coverage of the market, which drives success and financial equity. In the case that this car, which is 47 years older than this car, still was technologically groundbreaking during its time because of these simple things that they added to fit the consumer need. And GM has done that time and time again, leading them to be the #1 manufacturer in America. In the case of William C. Durant, starting off as a small vehicle manufacturer, his legacy has turned into so much more due to that adaptation that the company has experienced over time. In the case that they have started off with minimal brands and have started up new brands and discontinued those brands. In the case of Pontiac, this Firebird is a Pontiac. I also happen to drive a 1998 Pontiac Trans Am, as shown here. In the case that these two cars are completely different, each of which displayed innovation and advancement. These cars have since been discontinued in the case that Pontiac was seen to be somewhat failing as a company. Not that they were so much losing money, but in the case that it was better for GM to transfer its focus to its new developments. So with Pontiac being started after the founding of GM in 1908, not only did they drive sales for a while with their popular cars like the Firebird and the Trans Am and the GTO, these cars were groundbreaking. The GTO, many times known as the first muscle car. The brand that started that in GM and its smaller subdivision of Pontiac was since discontinued, but not in a way that they experienced a financial disadvantage, but that they transferred that focus to other brands like their newer models in Cadillac and Buick and GMC and Chevrolet. Many times people like to compare, Ford and all these other cars. You can compare all you want, but at the end of the day, GM does have the most sales in current American times. And that displays how they started off as, not only is GM a smaller company than Ford, but they started off much smaller with, trying to catch up coming 5 years after Ford. In the case that they were constantly trying to be better and get to Ford's level. And not only have they done that, but they've since surpassed them. And that means a lot. And in the case of innovation, you see this car as, crazy for its time. In the case of the backup camera and the services and the radio system, stuff like that would be absolutely astronomically like mind-blowing in the time of 1967. But even this car is since outdated, only being 9 years old. In the case that GM has since opened a EV electric vehicle manufacturing basis, in which they are now turning their focuses to electric vehicle manufacturing. And that means a lot because not only has GM changed since the beginning of time, in which they started off as a small truck manufacturer. They went from small trucks to muscle cars to commuter cars to modern day trucks, and now are once again displaying their adaptation into modern times in the case of their electric vehicles, which are supply and demand and are set to skyrocket sales because of the fact that GM over time has consistently kept with societal ideals and consumer wants and needs, and that overall displays GM advancement and intelligence in the marketing basis, and has allowed them to have a grasp on the sales market and allowed them to be number one in America. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you understand further the grasp on the market and innovation that GM has, and their pure adaptation that they have been able to display over time, from a car that was made 56 years ago to a car that was made 9 years ago. In the case that each car is technologically groundbreaking in its own way, but it is still just a small portion of what General Motors Company is as a whole. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.